NFL player Kevin Ware Jr. is being looked at as a person of interest in the disappearance of his girlfriend.
She vanished after a party. Her boyfriend, a former NFL star, said nothing. Months later, her body was found burned in a ditch. What happened to Taylor Pomaski? And why did Kevin Ware think he could get away with it? She was beautiful, vibrant, and only 29. A Texas girl with a big smile and a bigger heart. But one April night in 2021, after a small house party, Taylor Pomaski vanished without a trace. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. And standing closest to her that night, a former NFL player, her boyfriend, Kevin Ware, a man who once played under stadium lights, now shrouded in suspicion and silence. For months, her family searched, clinging to hope, haunted by fear. And when the truth finally surfaced, it was darker than anyone could have imagined. This is not just the story of a missing woman. It's the story of control, of abuse, of a man who hid in plain sight and a justice system that moved too slow. You're about to hear chilling witness accounts, shocking courtroom revelations, and the unraveling of a life stolen too soon. This is the case of Taylor Pomaski and the ex-NFL star who thought he could get away with murder. This is America's Hidden Monster. Let's begin. He had the face of an athlete, the fame of a former NFL star, and the swagger of someone who'd made it out. To the world, Kevin Ware was a success story. A tight end who once played for the 49ers, the Raiders, and the Washington Commanders. He wore the jersey, he gave the interviews, he signed the autographs. But behind the pads and headlines was something else, something darker. Because not every monster hides under your bed. Some of them smile for cameras. Some of them are invited into your home. And in the spring of 2021, one of them was living in Spring, Texas, behind closed doors, alongside a woman who wouldn't live to tell her story.
Taylor Pomaski was 29. She was soft-spoken, but quick to laugh, with a spark that lit up the room and eyes that searched for safety in people. On April 25, 2021, she hosted a party at her home. Friends came, drinks flowed. The night was like any other, until it wasn't. Because that night, in the hours after the guests left, Taylor Pomaski disappeared. She didn't show up for work. She didn't call her mom. Her phone went silent. Days passed, then weeks. But the man she lived with, Kevin Ware, the man who once made headlines for catching touchdowns, didn't report her missing. He didn't call the police. He didn't even ask for help. Why? Because maybe he already knew where she was. Leslie Mandeville knew something was wrong. When your daughter stops answering her phone, your heart doesn't just break, it starts screaming. She last heard Taylor's voice on April 16. It wasn't a goodbye, it was just another check-in. But when days passed with no word, no text, no sign, Leslie filed a missing persons report. The house was quiet. The neighbors were quiet. And Kevin Ware, he stayed silent too. He didn't join the search. He didn't print flyers. He didn't even return calls. But when you're a mother, silence isn't emptiness, it's terror, a kind that grows louder with every unanswered ring. And Leslie, she refused to stay quiet, because while the world moved on, she started looking. To understand what happened to Taylor, you have to understand Kevin. By 2021, Ware wasn't just a former NFL player. He was a felon, already facing drug and weapons charges. When he was pulled over just days after Taylor vanished, He wasn't going 60 in a 45. He was doing 115 miles per hour with cocaine, meth, and a loaded AK-47 in his car. This wasn't a man falling from grace. This was a man spiraling into something darker. Neighbors recalled fights. Friends described controlling behavior. And prosecutors would later say Ware isolated Taylor, cutting her off from her family, manipulating her, controlling who she saw and where she went. Behind the charm was a predator, and behind the fame was fear. What started as a relationship ended in a prison of fear. Taylor's loved ones say she changed in the months leading up to her disappearance. She became withdrawn. Her contact with friends grew sporadic. And her mother, Leslie, would later say Ware kept her daughter isolated, gaslighting her, monitoring her, making sure she was too afraid to leave. At the party the night she vanished, witnesses recalled the fight, shouting behind closed doors. Some said they heard screams. But by the time police came asking questions, stories began to twist. Some witnesses were in jail themselves. Others were afraid. One man claimed he heard Kevin beat her that night. Another woman said Kevin confessed, claiming he slit Taylor's throat in the shower. No one could say it all. But no one could say she was alive either. And Taylor? She never got the chance to speak for herself. Tim Miller and the volunteers at Texas EcoSearch have seen heartbreak. But this was different. This was personal. They walked through woods. They scoured ditches. They followed any lead, no matter how faint. With every passing day, the hope of finding Taylor alive slipped further away. Miller said it plainly. Taylor is probably not alive. And still, her mother refused to stop searching. The silence from Ware was deafening. No confession, no cooperation, no answers. Just a man walking free while the family chased shadows. And then finally, a break, a tip, a property, and the scent of something unforgivable. On December 10th, 2021, nearly 8 months after she vanished, skeletal remains were found in a ditch in North Harris County. It wasn't a grave. It was a dumping ground. It wasn't closure. It was confirmation of a nightmare. It was Taylor, the woman with the quiet laugh, the spark, the hope for a future, reduced to bones and ash. Investigators later said her remains were burned. And where were they found? On property linked to a drug dealer associated with Kevin Ware. The puzzle pieces were bloody and broken, but they finally began to fit. Her family got their answer, but not the one they prayed for. And the real horror, it wasn't over yet. When Kevin Ware finally sat in that courtroom, he wasn't in a jersey. He wasn't smiling for cameras. He sat cold, blank, silent. But the people who loved Taylor, they spoke. Her father, Stephen, couldn't stop imagining her final moments. Was she begging? Was she pleading? He asked. She didn't leave this world with peace, just horror. Her mother called Ware a monster. Her grandmother, her aunts, each voice trembled with grief and rage. And still, Ware never flinched. The man who refused to help search now had no choice but to listen. But would he finally be held accountable? Days before trial, Kevin Ware pleaded guilty to murder and tampering with Taylor's body. No courtroom drama, no lengthy testimony. Just a 30-year sentence and a plea deal that spared the family a long trial. Prosecutors admitted the case was hard. Witnesses were inconsistent. Some were criminals themselves.
But the evidence, the timeline, the silence, it all pointed to one man. Detectives had made a promise to Leslie Mandeville to bring her daughter home. And in the end, they did. Just not the way anyone wanted. There's justice, and then there's justice delayed. But to Taylor's family, at least it wasn't denied. Kevin Ware will spend the next 30 years behind bars. But what does that really mean for Taylor? She's still gone. A mother still wakes up wishing it was all a bad dream. A father still asks what his daughter saw in her final moments. And a community still reckons with the realization that monsters don't always hide. Sometimes they smile on Sundays. This wasn't just a story of a missing woman. It was a story of a system too slow, a predator too protected, and a family that refused to give up. Because justice isn't just a sentence, it's a promise, and the world must keep it for Taylor. Before Taylor disappeared, the warning signs were there, but like so many abusive relationships, they were buried beneath charm, silence, and denial. Kevin Ware had a history, weapons charges, drug possession, controlling behavior. He isolated Taylor from her loved ones, made her harder to reach, harder to recognize. Friends noticed bruises. Her mother sensed fear in her voice. But Taylor, like so many, tried to protect the man hurting her. Or maybe she was just trying to survive. The red flags weren't just waving, they were screaming. But no one stopped him. And when a man this dangerous is free, how many lives hang in the balance? Kevin Ware was once a rising star, a tight end with the 49ers, the Raiders, the Commanders. On paper, he lived the dream: fame, money, power. But behind that helmet, there was a man no team ever truly knew. Because in America, we celebrate athletes for what they do on the field, not who they are off of it. And when the career ends, what's left behind? For Ware, it was a spiral. Drugs, violence, crime, a descent masked by former glory. The NFL didn't pull the trigger, but did they help build the man who did? Taylor wasn't the only woman in Kevin Ware's orbit. Court records, witness statements, they all suggest a pattern: controlling behavior, verbal abuse, physical threats. One woman told detectives Ware confessed to her that he slit Taylor's throat in the shower. Another recalled hearing Taylor scream as he beat her. These weren't anonymous rumors. They were cries for help. And yet he walked free again and again. So we have to ask, when do we start believing women the first time? For months after Taylor vanished, Ware lived like nothing had happened. He partied, he traveled, he sped down highways with guns, meth, and cocaine in his car. He even missed check-ins with his bond officer. He didn't run, he didn't hide, he didn't need to. Because when the system looks the other way, monsters learn to walk proudly in daylight. He thought the witnesses were too unreliable, the timeline too messy, the body too hard to trace back to him. But justice doesn't always come with the spotlight. Sometimes it comes in the quiet promise of a detective who won't give up. Taylor Pomaski wasn't famous. She wasn't rich. She didn't play in the NFL or live in a mansion. She was a daughter, a friend, a woman who wanted love and got a nightmare instead. We talk so much about Kevin Ware, about his downfall, his guilt, his crimes. But this story isn't about him. It's about Taylor and every woman who's ever felt trapped, silenced, or ignored. If there's one name we should remember, let it be hers. Taylor Pomaski was more than a news headline. She was a daughter, a friend, a soul full of light, taken by darkness. Her story reminds us that even behind the brightest smiles, danger can hide in plain sight. That sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones we should fear. And that silence, whether from a system, a bystander, or a killer, can be deadly. But we're not here to stay silent. We're here to speak her name, to shine a light on the truth, to make sure Taylor is never forgotten. If her story moved you even just a little, please don't scroll past. Take a second to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment below. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe Kevin Ware got the justice Taylor deserved? Or is there more to be done? You can also share this video because every view, every voice, every conversation makes a difference. Together, we can honor Taylor. We can demand better, and we can protect others before it's too late. Stay aware, stay compassionate, and most of all, stay loud.